Hi, this is Jake. This is Politics by Jake. Welcome to the show. It's our usual Saturday weekend show, and we have one on Saturday and we have one on Sunday. The Sunday one's at 1 p.m. This one, obviously, is at 12 noon. So, it's 2026. All of those of you who are listening, we knew we have new listeners all the time. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the fight. And let's dispense immediately, all right, with the fiction that anything about this moment is normal, because it isn't. What we're living through is not politics as usual. It is a signal moment. It is power asserting itself nakedly, impatiently, petulantly, and with increasing contempt for the people that it governed. Now, of course, lest we go too far, we wish everyone, hope you had a happy Martin Luther King Day. We're delighted to have you with us. This is our weekly strategic summary overview briefing designed to facilitate not so much contemplation. That's okay too, but mainly action, right? Activa Vita is the name of the game. And of course, it is world historical. It is the big picture. It is not issues of particularism, parochialism, group dynamics, or anything of that sort. No, this is the big world strategic picture that we try to evoke and provide guidance to persons of goodwill who are desirous of improving the course of world history here in our time. And we are now in the beginning of this new year, 2026, certainly, finding that, if anything, the world crisis has exacerbated itself here as we go into the election year, crucial election year of the United States, and possibly a year of decision on other fronts and for the nation and the fate of the world as well. And we are now in the beginning of this new year of 2026. We are now in the United States, until further notice. The big priority is to facilitate the takeover of the House of Representatives and the Senate of the United States by the Democratic Party, hopefully by centrist, moderate, center-left, New Deal-style Democrats, people who are devoted to the idea of a heavily regulated form of industrial capitalism based on mass traction economic demands. And this, of course, means that the parochial demands, the color groups, the identity groups, the specific attempts of one group or another, and it doesn't even matter who they are. It doesn't matter who they are. It's not the point. The point is that no group can be allowed to interfere with or even sabotage the progress of the whole. There's just too much at stake. Governing by identity groups is like putting the cart before the horse. You've got to win the election, and then the identity groups can begin to assert themselves. But right now we have to win the election because you're dealing with a ruling class in some ways, and we've talked about on the show, and it's identifiable with Trump, who, in my opinion, they're using him. Trump wants everybody to be his friend. He wants these rich billionaires to be his friend. He's just being used. It's getting to be much more complicated, but certainly it's a ruling class which is implacably opposed, and we have to make it in those terms, implacably opposed to any significant concessions on the front that we're addressing right now: taxation, economic demands, the minimum wage, the question of the health care funding, and so on. And that's got to be the principal battlefield. However, at the same time, you've also got to look back, as I have always urged, to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because as the kind of model that needs to be done, of what needs to be done, Roosevelt was, of course, the principal sponsor of things like the Social Security Act of 1935. So Social Security, unemployment insurance, and, old age pensions under Social Security, the Republicans have never accepted the reforms of 1935. They opposed them from the very beginning, and they are opposing them now. And so we're getting to be about a century on, not quite, but coming up, and they're still opposing them as much as they did in 1935. And that's a predicament still today. So the idea is class-based, it's class-wide, it's inclusive, it's mass traction economic demands. Some reforms, but not principally cultural issues. and various other issues, whether of partial interest, parochial interest, but rather the welfare of the whole people and the survival of the nation against powerful enemies. Now, some more powerful than others, but Russia, China, Iran, the totalitarian bloc, totalitarian, militaristic, autocratic, dictatorial, that's them. And that line has to be drawn with the maximum of clarity. Now, to get into the specifics of the current predicament, here we are practically 1 year in this coming week. It will be 1 year since Trump's second seizure of power. And of course, it's a shameful indictment of the opposition that this character was ever allowed to seize power, even one time, let alone a second time. But now we're in the midst of the truly baleful, destructive consequences, and you're seeing it. I have people contacting me and viewing my shorts and my shows every day because they're concerned with what they see. The destructive consequences of Trump's second seizure of power. And we have any number of crises. We've got Iran. We've got the Greenland crisis. We've got the Minneapolis ICE, the Gestapo of the streets, Gestapo goons on your block in the United States. We've got that as a crisis too. And it's quite serious. Plus a series of others. The healthcare crisis, I'm afraid, has not advanced. We had an unsuccessful vote this week in Congress about restoring those Obamacare subsidies. By the way, if you go to Grover Norquist's American for Tax Reform, you'll see that the thing that pops up first is that there should not be any subsidies offered. Any tax breaks at all offered for Americans. And, you know, Grover Norquist, don't get me started about this guy, but he's all about that. No tax breaks at all for Americans, American citizens desperate for health care of some kind so that they don't face the risk of catastrophic illness all by themselves. And that, of course, is the goal. Republicans say they want to give you the money. Yeah, sure. They want to give you the money, all right. A few thousand measly Rasputniks. But what they don't want is to take away the risk. They don't have the same idea that we preach here on Politics by Jake, that the middle class is the great economic engine of society. And when I say society, I certainly mean the American society. It has created the most powerful nation in the world economically, but also of the world. It's the same thing for the world. So they're not acknowledging that at all, which is, ridiculous. They're giving you the money and it's peanuts. Like I said, it's a few $1,000s, it's chicken feed. And then they're giving you the risk, which is, of course, practically open-ended, practically infinite. And the whole purpose of insurance is to mitigate the risk. So what they're doing is they're taking away the principal purpose of all this and letting you fall back on your own meager, wretched savings, which you've been dipping into for quite some time to maintain, to keep body and soul together from 1 week or month to the next. So, we're dealing with a political crisis. We have the question of power being posed. And at this point, let's take a break. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Politics by Jake in 2026. And we'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And I want to begin today with a phrase you have been hearing more and more often, one that I talked about briefly last Sunday, and I want to go further with it now. And that phrase is domestic terrorism. And last week, I called it what it really is, a canard. Canard is a word that may be unfamiliar to you. The French certainly know. Canard is the French word for duck. And yeah, I'm talking about a duck. I'm talking about like a fowl, like a chicken or a goose, a duck. Canard is the French word for a duck, which already tells you something, because the French also think Jerry Lewis was a comic genius, so we should probably keep our expectations realistic. But a canard doesn't just mean a duck, it means a lie. It means a spurious story. It means a fraudulent narrative. It means something that's obviously false, that spreads anyway because it's useful. And the term comes from an old French story about a duck that supposedly ate 19 other ducks. It's a story so absurd, it should have died immediately, but it didn't, because people repeated it anyway. Sensational nonsense swallowed whole. That's what a canard is. And that is exactly what domestic terrorism has become in the hands of this administration, because it is not being applied based on evidence. It is not being applied based on law. It is being applied for sensationalism and for convenience. When Kristi Noem and her ICE apparatus hurled this accusation in Minnesota, the person involved had no criminal record to speak of. Maybe a traffic citation, but look, this is not criminality. That's barely an infraction. And yet she was labeled a domestic terrorist. And why? There's a dark reason why. It was done premeditatedly, with malice, and with forethought in order to justify violence. To justify what is, under any honest reading of the facts, either first degree or second degree murder, perpetrated under color of law, under color of legal right authority. And this is important. So listen carefully. That is now what domestic terrorism means. It means the retroactive branding of a civilian as a threat in order to excuse state violence against someone who exercised their First Amendment right. And let's really be clear about this, because I understand that when people see these things, all of a sudden they're not so sure about their rights anymore, and they're asking around, casting about to find out what their rights are. Let me tell you, there's nothing illegal, nothing about peaceful assembly. There's nothing illegal about freedom of expression. There's nothing illegal about petitioning the government for redress of grievances. These things are not fringe constitutional theory. This is bedrock Anglo-American political history. It is so deep and so broad, in fact, that we have idioms for it. Like, that ship has sailed. That train has left the station. That horse has left the barn. Those sheep have already left the pen. And do you know what those all mean? You're not even close. You don't even have a case here. Which is why anyone pushing this narrative should immediately prompt one question in your mind. Why are they doing this? And that is why I called it a canard. That is why others call it a canard. Yes, even the French, lovers of Jerry Lewis, as they are, call it a canard. Because it is a lie designed to be believed by the frightened, by the credulous, by the politically unarmed, the easily led. That's why. And that's who. Now, you might ask, how does this work? Why does it work? Why is it even possible for an illegitimate administration to deploy what amounts to a modern Gestapo against its own citizens? This is the reason. Because they want violence. They know. They know that if a demonstration turns violent, even briefly, even marginally, they can point and say, see, terrorists, we told you so. This is what happened in East Germany when the wall came down. The Stasi, the East German secret police, they were lined up, machine guns out, just waiting for an agitation to occur so they could shoot the citizens down and so they could stop what turned out to be the reunification of East and West Germany. But they couldn't do it. Why? No provocation, no provocative act. Everything was peaceful. And this is why. The Stasi wanted an excuse, but they didn't get it. And for a certain segment of the population, like I said, the gullible, the credulous, the easily led, the politically unsophisticated, that accusation has emotional weight. See? Terrorists. It feels true to them. It sounds true to them. Which is why peaceful resistance matters. Because violence would give them exactly what they want. But here's the darker truth. By branding dissent itself as terrorism, they have defanged, and this is dark, they have defanged accountability entirely, their own accountability. They have created a situation where they can be obscene, they can be abusive, they can be cruel, and the worst that happens is people shout shame, blow whistles, take pictures. They know this. They're counting on it. So where does this come from? What is the psychology behind this? For that, we turn to Carl Jung. 1875, Swiss psychiatrist. Jung talked about something he called the collective psychosis, the idea that entire populations can enter into a shared psychological fever dream, a kind of group hallucination where narrative replaces reality. And central to this idea is the concept of the wounded leader and the wounded follower. The wounded leader embodies grievance. The wounded follower lives their pain through him. And here we arrive at Donald Trump. And I ask you, what's his favorite phrase? I bet you could tell me. I'll tell you, but I'll bet you can tell me. It's unfair. I've been treated so unfairly. That's what he says. And that phrase is not accidental. It's a dog whistle to people whose lives have admittedly not worked out the way they were promised, be it bad jobs, stagnant wages, debt, humiliation, family troubles, divorce, kids that don't love you, a sense of having been cheated. And they have been through so much of this that they have devolved to the point where they don't believe their lives can improve. And so instead, they live vicariously through a man who screams grievance on their behalf. And Trump is wounded. Listen to his niece, Mary. Listen to her talk about it. She's a board-certified psychologist. Listen to Bandy Lee, a board-certified psychiatrist from Yale. Trump is wounded, and his followers are wounded. That is the Jungian echo chamber. And into that echo chamber come uniforms, guns, and authority, and a narrative that says your enemies are everywhere. And the members of ICE Gestapo, and I do call them Gestapo, they are among those wounded. Some of them were in the mob on January 6th, a day of infamy if there ever was one in the United States. just as bad in its own way as the original Day of Infamy on December 7th, 1941. And the clarion cry ought to go out that January 6th, 2021 was, is, and forever after shall be a day of infamy, equal to or greater than December 7th, 1941. And let's take a break at this point. This is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And thank you very much, Twain Consulting. This is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Now let's talk about immigration, okay? Because this is where history truly becomes unavoidable. When the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the other tribes that crossed into Rome, and, you know, if you look at a map that shows all the invasions and incursions into Rome, it was just amazing. It's just, there were so many. But they weren't coming for the aesthetic. They weren't coming for the circuses, or they weren't coming for the horse races, the chariot races. They weren't coming for the great architecture. They weren't coming for the great plays. They were coming for survival. You know why? Rome had land. Rome had food. Rome had economic opportunity. And people, well, people go where life is possible. That has not changed at all in 2,000 years, which is why the so-called illegal immigration crisis, it's largely a lie. And look, there's much that can be talked about, but we can focus on this problem right away by saying if employers would not hire undocumented workers, there would be no crisis. The real problem is not illegal immigrants. The real problem is illegal employers. And under United States law, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, employers are required to verify work authorization. That's why the I-9 exists. If they violate that requirement, they're breaking, and I'm referring to the employers, if they violate that requirement, which they do all the time, they are breaking federal law. But employers have political power. Immigrants do not. So in this case, this is an example of how enforcement flows downwards, always. So let's return to Minnesota now, because this is where abstraction becomes blood. You have ICE raids. You have federal agents refusing entry to elected officials. It's amazing. You have civilians detained without transparency. And then you have the killing of Renee Nicole Good. Neither a minority or a person of color, 37-year-old U.S. citizen, mother of three, poet, award-winning poet, I might add, community member, and her wife said it in one sentence: we had whistles, they had guns. And you have this video evidence, which I'm telling you is very clear. It shows her vehicle turning away when she was shot. This is not law enforcement, okay? This is class violence under color of law, using the excuse of the law. And it matters deeply that she was white and that she was a woman and that she wasn't a young woman. She was a middle-aged woman with 3 kids. She had a family. And when you find that, when you learn that that is the case, the illusion cracks, doesn't it? See, this is not about race. How could it be? She's white. This is about power. So now, and we talked about this on the show last week, so now we need to talk about class. And we need to do it precisely, not sloppily. There's a difference between a national bourgeoisie and what Plato called an oligarchic man. A national bourgeoisie, and this is just so important. Please, this may seem dry to you, but please stay with me. It's important as a responsible citizen to know these things and understand them. And stay with us here at Politics by Jake when we talk about them. A national bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie, they're the landed people. They're the people that own property. They have capital. That's what the bourgeoisie is. A national bourgeoisie exploits the system. They definitely do, but they also preserve it. The national bourgeoisie needs courts. It needs contracts. It needs stability. It needs legitimacy. It can't survive without those. Yes, it shears the sheep, but it does not flay it alive. It does not kill the cash cow. But the oligarchic man is something else entirely. He is unrooted. He is extractive. Selfishly so. He is short-term. He is indifferent to collapse. He treats the state as a loot box. He treats the law as an obstacle. And he treats democracy as a nuisance. Collapse is not a failure. It is the exit strategy for such a person. You have this example in Greek writing of someone who's called the old oligarch. And there was an argument in the Greeks because the people wanted a wall extended around the city of Athens so that they could be protected against Sparta, or the Persians for that matter. But the old oligarch argued against that. Why? Because it would cost them money. And one wonders, especially in light of what we see in these days, so many people taking bribes, so many people with emoluments, so many people with privilege, so many people with monetary prerogatives. We wonder if he had already made this old oligarch a deal with the Persians or a deal with the Spartans. And because it's ridiculous. Of course, a wall to protect the city against invading forces makes sense. Why would you argue against such a thing? But this is my point. Oligarchs are different. And this may well be difficult for you to understand, that they are extractive and short-term, and they don't care if Athens collapses. They don't care if the United States collapses. They don't care about the people. As I said, democracy is just a nuisance. And collapse, not failure, exit strategy. And this is where people get it wrong, by the way. Trump is not the cause. Trump is an instrument. Trump is a battering ram. You've heard me talk about Mikey of the old Life cereal commercials and how no one would eat Life because they had heard that it was healthy. I don't know, maybe it said it on the box or something. And they got Mikey to eat it because Mikey would eat anything. And he ate it and he liked it. And they were stunned that something healthy could also taste good and Mikey would like it. This is Mikey. He's a battering ram. Trump is a battering ram. He'll do anything because he wants the oligarchs, the billionaires, to love him. And he wants to appear as a billionaire. That's what he wants. Those are the people he loves. Now, here's where this all, locks together, okay? I was rereading an old document recently. You may have heard it. The Declaration of Independence. And with almost no changes, none that really matter, All these things apply now. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, I don't have to change that right there. And this, the history of the present President of the United States is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, standing armies, swarming officers, protection from punishment for murders, obstruction of justice, transportation beyond the seas. And then the line that should chill you. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress and were answered with injury. This is not revolutionary rhetoric. This is constitutional diagnosis. You could put that text on the front page of the New York Times today with modern names and modern locations, and no honest reader could deny the resemblance. So here's the truth. Oligarchy, it can survive anger. Yeah, that's good. It can survive chaos, thrives on it. It can survive the failure surrounding it. What it can't survive is recognition, because once you name it, it loses power. Trump, take it from me, okay? I know I've told you before. Trump does not care about you. The oligarchs, they do not care about you. They want your fear. They want your obedience. They want your silence. And I am here to tell you, calmly, clearly, without hysteria, that is not inevitable. I'm Jake. This is Politics by Jake. And now you know what you're looking at. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, thank you, Twain Consulting. This is Politics by Jake, and we're back. There's one more thing we have to talk about tonight, because without it, none of what I've laid out fully makes sense. So let's kind of rehash here. We've talked about repression today. We've talked about canards. We've talked about violence under the color of the law, violence against innocent civilians, violence against citizens and other people protected by the laws of the United States, acting under cover, not merely under color, but under cover of the law in order to hide their depredations and to hide their illegality. And we've talked about grievance psychology, and we've talked about oligarchy, but there's a larger structural signal underneath all of it. And once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing it everywhere. So are you ready? Because I'm going to give it to you now. And that signal is this. Power has lost the ability to prioritize. Now, that may not sound dramatic, but it's one of the most dangerous moments any political system can reach, because when power can't decide what matters most, everything becomes an emergency and nothing gets resolved. So, I mean, think about what you've been watching, okay? Over the past year, not one crisis, many crises, simultaneous crises, overlapping crises. And these are crises that don't get resolved. They just stack. I enumerated them for you at the beginning of the show, but it's like Iran, immigration, ICE Gestapo in the streets, healthcare, elections. The 800, basically a trillion, 880 billion, but that's getting up there towards $1 trillion of subsidies taken away from people, citizens, Quirites, Romans. Sorry, schoolboy Latin slipping in there. And elections, foreign threats, domestic enemies, none of these. They're all there. You're hearing about them in the news every day, but none of these are being addressed in a way that reduces pressure. They just continue. And that's not a coincidence. That's not incompetence alone. That is a structural failure. Healthy governments, they triage, they rank threats, they decide what matters now versus later. Is this going to destroy the country now? Okay, we do that first. Is this not going to destroy the country today? Okay, we don't do that. We do that second. We do that tomorrow. But unhealthy governments, they don't solve problems. They react. And reaction, it produces more crises, not fewer. This is what political overload looks like. Every new issue gets framed as existential. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every protest becomes terrorism. Not because it is, but because the system has, number one, it's lost its internal hierarchy of importance. And number two, it feels threatened from the outside. And not only does it feel threatened by these crises, but it feels threatened by its own citizenry and its need to control the narrative relative to what it wants the citizenry to hear and what it does not want them to hear. That which would be pejorative and would be factually negative and would give rise because they want to stay in power. Power wants to perpetuate itself. That's what it wants to do. And so when everything is urgent, urgency loses meaning. And like I said, this is kind of done on purpose. Like everything is falling apart and you need us to stay in power past 2026, past 2028, past 2050 in order to make sure that you're safe. Because we're the ones holding it to. So you see what I mean? Urgency loses meaning. It becomes banal. And when urgency loses meaning, authority starts relying on force instead. And that there's a mistake people make here. They assume that the chaos is intentional, a master plan, and sometimes it is. More often, it's something else entirely. It's flooding. And flooding is what happens when competency is not present and when control starts slipping. So you overwhelm the system, the public, the media, the opposition, not because you're confident, but because you're afraid of focus. Because you're afraid, focus brings scrutiny. Focus brings judgment. Scrutiny brings judgment. So you don't allow that to happen. Focus brings recognition of what it is that this illegitimate regime, or any, but the Trump regime is illegitimate. The Trump regime is going to get impeached. There's going to be a lot of impeachment. That the groundwork is being laid for that even now with the Democrats, basically out of control of the government. They're not in control of the government. They're the minority party right now. But they're preparing for that. And they're preparing the way for the Republicans to join them. So for right now, though, you don't want that if you're a right-wing reactionary or fascist, if you're a Trumpist, if you're a MAGAist, if you're in the administration, if you like your free car service, if you like your entitlements, if you like the power, you don't do any of that. You saturate the environment, you see. You create too many stories to follow. And that is the role of the propaganda arm of MAGA, of Trump, of fascism. Newsmax, One America News Network, Fox News, and the other ones. You create too many stories to follow, too many outrages to track, too many threats to evaluate, and you seed and salt and season liberally with propaganda. And you get to a point where they hear these things repeated so often, oh, so often. First it's Fox News. Let's go to One News Network. Let's see One American News Network. Let's see what's going on there. Oh, let's go to Newsmax. Let's see what they're saying. And let's go back to Fox News because it's time to go. You know what I mean? You see? You get it? So after a while, people are inured. They're inured with the propaganda, and they stop asking, is this legal? Is this proportional? Is this legitimate? And they start asking, what's next? What just happened? Did I miss something? We go back to Fox News. See, did I miss something? Newsmax? What is Newsmax saying about this? What is One American News Network saying about this? Did I miss something? You see, that confusion isn't strength. It's defensive behavior. Stable power simplifies. Failing power complicates. Stable power narrows the frame. Failing power, well, it widens it until no one can see the edges anymore. And here's the key point. It works. At least in the beginning, at least briefly, it works. But it comes at a cost. Because once people realize that they're being propagandized, that they're being overwhelmed, that there is a purposeful media blitz on behalf of the administration under color of authority, and as I said before with ICE Gestapo, under cover of authority, trust collapses fast. And once trust is gone, it does not return on command. And at this point, let's take another break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. The world is unraveling fast. Governments are weakening, markets are crashing, chaos is looming. You need more than hope. You need a plan. Collapse Protocol gives you the tools to protect your assets, secure your future, and survive the storm. Don't wait for the collapse to hit. Prepare now. Visit Twain Consulting at facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call 213-465-0639. Collapse Protocol, your shield when everything else fails. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together. And thank you, Twain Consulting. This is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Now, this is where everything I've said today connects. When power loses legitimacy at home, it looks outward. Not always for conquest, not always for war, but for symbolic assertion, for external enemies, for foreign villains, for international leverage, not because those things solve domestic problems, quite the opposite. Because they, number one, they create problems. Number two, they enhance or exacerbate, make worse. They make problems worse. But because they create the appearance of authority, we're in control here. We're the ones that are dealing with these problems. Look at this problem over here. We're in control. We're saving you. And God bless the United States of America. They provide a stage, a way to say, look, I still matter. Look, I'm still feared. Look, Donald Trump. Taco? Who said taco? Who said Trump always chickens out? Look at me. I'm still decisive. This is an old pattern, okay? It's an ancient pattern. When rulers stop being believed by their own people, they seek validation elsewhere. They don't need to win, they just need to perform dominance. And that's when rhetoric escalates. Boundaries get tested that way, alliances get strained that way, norms get treated like suggestion, not as a strategy, but as a reassurance, as a reassurance. So today isn't about the specifics of any one foreign flashpoint. Today is about, and I'm not talking about today, Saturday, but I'm talking about today, the situation we're in today. It's about recognizing why those flashpoints start appearing at all. Because once you understand the pattern, you'll stop being surprised by the headlines. I mean, look, let's give you an example here. Just one of many examples that I could give, but let's do this. Uh, Trump is not fit, and this is one of the reasons I'm going to explain to you. He's not fit. He's not fit to govern, and here's some of the reasons why. Number one, his logic is lacking. He says, "I have to own Greenland." Here we're going to talk a little bit about Greenland. We're going to do more on. We just don't have enough time. We're going to do more on tomorrow's show. I have to own. This is his philosophy. You need to listen to this. This is clear. This is serious. It's not frenetic. It's not he's mentally ill, which he is. It's not emotionally compromised, which he unquestionably is. It's not that he's a pedophile or that he associates with pedophiles. Just all of that stuff you could prove, but we're not talking about that. He's not fit to govern. For example, his logic is lacking. He says, I have to own Greenland in order to defend it. Well, look, we already have treaties with Greenland, okay? We defended it in World War II against the Nazis, and we can do the same thing now. We don't need to own it. But Trump is a businessman, and his logic proceeds from a business model. It does not proceed forth from a governmental model. It does not proceed forth even really from any kind of proper political model. It does not proceed forth from an alliance model. That's just not him. That's not who he is. That's like trying to say a cat is a dog. It's just not the same thing. It just doesn't work. And not only that, he is neurotic. He's in bad physical shape. This guy's in bad shape. All right, so I'm putting a little bit of that into the show, but I don't need to, because the raison d'etre, the philosophy that I'm explaining now, makes my case prima facie, which means firsthand, best evidence that he's unfit to govern. So he's proceeding from a deranged mental condition. Yeah, he is, and he's thinking is not logical though, and also he's thinking the only way I can defend, I have to own it. No, 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 no. You don't have to do that. Um, it's not logical. He's thinking does not cohere with statecraft. This is not statecraft that I have to own everything, or otherwise I won't defend it. That the United States created for the Pax Americana, which has kept the peace. Yeah, my eyes are open. Relatively speaking, it's kept the peace. Certainly kept the peace in Europe. I would talk more about these things. I've talked about them. I don't want to spend an entire, like I said, it's not enough time. We're at the end of the show. Entire show on them. But, I want to give you brief observations as asides so that you understand where I'm coming from, why I say these things. I mean, look, what's the point? Why do you want to antagonize allies? Uh, Denmark is actually, this is interesting. I had to do the research on this. Denmark is one of the longest American allies, and it clocks in at 225 years. And that's about the longest of any nation. So, okay, so there's some example. And he's not fit. He can't govern. because this is the way he thinks. He thinks like a nickel nursing, penny pinching, money grubbing Queen's landlord, because that's what he is. And that doesn't line up with statecraft. That doesn't line up with alliances. All right, so finally, if this moment feels unstable, that's because it is. And it's not because of one man, not because of one party, but because the system under pressure has stopped making choices. And you've heard me say time and time again, he's being used. He's a doofus. He really is. He is what I said. He's a penny pinching, nickel grubbing, miserly Queen's landlord. That's where he comes from. That's where he made his bones. But the people behind him, the ideologues, the technicians, these are the guys. These are the dangerous guys. This is what I've always said. And this system has stopped making choices and started producing noise because they know it's like the Russia. Putin. The people want to go to the EU. Why is Putin making basically Russia a fortress? Because nobody wants to be there. They all want to go to the EU. They want to join the EU. And Ukraine, which is a buffer state, or Russia considers a buffer state, they want to join the EU. This is absolutely unacceptable. You have Russia, which is like what, a 2.5 or $3.5 trillion economy, and you have the EU, and compare that to the EU. 3.5 trillion, that sounds pretty good, but you compare it to the EU, and what's the EU? 26 trillion? I think it's in excess of 26 trillion. The standard of living is better. It's much better. There's more freedom. I mean, the Russians can see this. They know. They understand. So Putin has to be this way. And Trump wants to be like Putin. He wants to be friends with Putin. He doesn't want to be friends with you. He wants to be friends with billionaires and oligarchs and people who are extractive. Okay. So all of this stuff doesn't mean that collapse is inevitable. It does mean that clarity is essential. Watch what gets repeated. Watch what gets normalized. Watch how quickly priorities shift, because history, it doesn't announce itself with a siren. It announces itself when power can no longer decide what matters most. I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake. And now, you know what you're looking at. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire, only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA.